I would appreciate it if a lot of us went back and asked ourselves, what are we leaving behind? And I think that's just something that has kept me very motivated. Being at home made me realize, I think when you leave and you stay there, you can rid yourself of the problems. But when you go back, you realize that nothing is going to change unless we are the ones that change it. Well, I'm Glenda Setshedi. I'm the founder of Pathfinders. Pathfinders is an startup incubation hub, and I currently incubate 300 startups that are township or locally based. And then there's Career Active. Career Active was founded way back when I was still an intern at Glencoe. And yeah, Career Active trains young students on career paths. So my background is NBI, which is Neathling Brain Instrument. Yeah, so both of those is what I do. I'm the founder of both companies. Glenda was born in Joburg, and then eventually my parents moved. We moved to Hammanskraal. Very humble beginnings. I used to go to a place where it's a kids club, and it really shaped the person that I am. Kept us away from the street. Osbelinda will forever, hold a special place in my heart because she was the mama that opened up her home and gathered us as children. And I think it definitely molded us a lot. So yeah, that's where I grew up. I grew up with a set of friends. We're still friends today, 18, 19 years later. And yeah, very, 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 very humble beginnings. So many people, I think, played a role in that aspect of my life. It's just to never forget where one comes from. And I think that has been something that has always just kept us grounded, no matter where we went in the world. As Glenda, in every room I step in, if I remember where I come from and just, how humble those beginnings were, it's not easy to just, forget just who you are as a person. And I think that shaped a lot of who I am today. Part and parcel, the values I would speak about, authenticity, definitely at the top. Nowhere in my life have I ever felt the need to be anybody different. I've always just embodied who I am, simply because I'm not ashamed of where I come from, and just being surrounded by people that tell you that nothing is impossible. And I think, like I said, Osbelinda played a very critical role. As a young girl, Kislapo was where we danced most, but we would have, the in-between talks. She would give us motherly talks on what it takes to take care of yourself as Ngwanyana, and just the possibilities that are endless for you. And so, and by the way, Blake Getsongoyena is called Temba. So Temba means hope. And yeah, I just saw the need to bear that name, and just embody it in its fullness and just become someone who stands on hope. I knew I would start my organization the moment I was stuck in a system that I couldn't change. I briefly worked in corporate, and I think the one thing that was the most disheartening in corporate was not having someone recognize the effort simply because of a system that exists. And I think I knew in that moment that I needed to do my own thing because I wanted a different environment that would recognize hard work, that would celebrate key milestones reached. And so when I worked in corporate in 2015, I just knew that I had outgrown the system and I knew that I wanted to get out. And that is what inspired Career Active. We used to travel a lot with work, and I would see how young kids just didn't have any direction of what they would do in the future. And I just felt a deep sense of saying the system does an injustice in preparing us for world after school. When you're stuck in the school environment, you know little or nothing about how life looks like post-school. And I think That's what's really inspired Careeractive. I just wanted to give kids a head start on this is what you can expect with life. Young Glenda has always been a leader, man. Yeah, from primary, man, I used to be that girl, but I think there was just always a compelling voice that I've always been probably the black sheep in the family, you know. I would dream a little crazy. I swear, if you had met the younger me, you'd probably think I'm crazy to even think certain things. I was just always the one person that would see, you know, whether it's a movie, I'd hear of a place and I'd say, where's that? You know, I want to go there. Why I can't know a place just with its name. I need to go see that place. And I would say that for me was a huge motivation when I would read a book and I'd be reading about a place I'd never been, and I would go on to, you know, search that place, and I want to know what it looks like, and I want to know the weather and the people and everything. And just being that person really just made me want to see the world. I was always just that curious person. To take you back a little bit is I attended a camp, and when I was there was someone who came in to present a model, and I was just so curious that what is it that they had studied that made them, you know, be able to provide that type of information for us. And I was like, okay, so there's a background in psychology there. And I'm like, it would be fascinating to understand humans. And just so that interest in studying humans and behavior and, you know, what makes us unique as individuals, in turn shaped me as a person. As I was learning how to study people, I learned a lot about myself. And gradually I could piece together that Glenda's not this type of person. I'm not this type of person. This is what I like. And that's how, when I was choosing the next thing to do, it was very, very kind of connected to who I was finding myself to be. Yeah, sure, man. COVID happened to a lot of us. So here's Glenda. 2019, I get selected for the Mandela Washington Fellowship. A girl from Hammanskraal, by the way. I'm traveling to the US, and I'm the first in my family to even do that. And it's so surreal. It's so crazy. So 2019, I get my acceptance letter from the Mandela Washington Fellowship, and I traveled to the US. Coming back, I had so much support from my institute, which was the University of Notre Dame. And then COVID happened, you know, when I was supposed to go back to the institution and further the organization. I was stuck back in SA with the reality that I couldn't continue. Obviously, my both companies are in contact companies. We do personal training, and COVID says stay at home and you're not allowed to see people. And then there was just a deep sense of desire to create a community of people that read. That's how Pathfinders was started. Pathfinders was just a deep desire to have people that were like me. So when I came back home, I felt like maybe there aren't people like me. Let's test this thing. Maybe there are, you know. And then 2021, I designed a poster and I said, I'm doing a meet and greet for people that just live to discuss business, that like reading, you know, self-empowerment books. Let's just get to know each other. And yeah, 2021, I do a meet and greet at our church, you know, because I just looked for a random venue and I'm like, let's test this. And it was such a huge success to realize that there are more and more people like me in Temba, in Hammanskraal. And that was just comforting to know that there are people who are just as inspired, just as, you know, driven to create change, you know, and just people who are really holding on to hope just like I am. And so when we gathered in 2021, it was easy to discuss how we envisioned Temba, you know. And I think that was also the deep desire that I came back with from the fellowship was, how do I take all the knowledge that I had received from the fellowship and bring it back home? I really wanted to create impact. I made a commitment that I didn't just go to the US to come back. You know, people travel the world and the first thing they want to tell you is how they've traveled. But I think we rarely ever think about what can I take from the world and bring back home. And I think that was the responsibility that I had as an individual to say, I'm not just seeing the world for myself. I have a responsibility to bring back all that knowledge home. And so Pathfinders was birthed 2021. We had a meet and greet 2020. end of 2021, I tested the market. And when I was testing the market, I challenged the mall. There's a local mall, and I said, why is it that we don't have locals that participate in this huge economy? The mall that sits in Temba is one of the best 3 malls in the country. Yet you have at most 2 locals that were participating in that economy. And for me, that was a burden to say, all this money that is in the township is leaving the township. We need to find a way to make sure that it goes back into the township and we are plowing back into our children or future generations. And that's how Pathfinders was birthed. Now, with the 300 startups that we incubate, they all have space, an opportunity to trade inside the mall now. I've built that relationship with corporate. We've grown so fast. 2021 counting now to the number of malls that we now incubate, it's insane. But we have locals now playing and taking part in that economy. Yeah, Career Active, man. Career Active was my practice ground. I made a lot of mistakes in Career Active. From a financial point, and gradually when you start learning that you need structure, Career Active was that. I remember there was a time where when I resigned and started Career Active, I took all of my savings and I thought, I'm going to start a business. And we got to a point where the business literally had 200 Rand left in the account. I still remember when we got our first contract. I always tell the story because the first thing we did was take a trip after we got our first contract. You know, we took a crazy trip with my friend because we just wanted to recover from not having money at all. And that's why I say it's so easy to get caught up in the money of the business and think, you know, it's supposed to, you know, make up for the time that you didn't have. And so for me, that was one of my biggest failures. The other one was not accepting a scholarship to Germany, simply because my mother passed away in that year, and I never thought I would recover. But in retrospect now, I would have never become the person that I was. So one of my biggest failures was just that fear. And when the Mandela Washington Fellowship presented itself, it was almost like God saying, this is another chance, you know, for me to go abroad and go see the world, that it's bigger than myself. It's funny because half of the time it's the founder, and I always have to emphasize, you are not the business. If we can separate themselves, and it's normally very hard for the entrepreneur to process, because then it means you are going to let go of certain tasks and the attachment to your business. And the minute you understand that you are not your business, its failure is no longer as personal to you. It's I can fail, and how do we fix it? Because it's no longer personal. So when you see entrepreneurs not being able to come back and revive the startup, is because they've made it about themselves, more about, oh, it's a mistake. We can actually come back and recover from this mistake. So that's the first line that I prepare each and every entrepreneur. You are not the business. The business is an entity. Yes, it's an idea that you came up with, but the business and yourself are 2 different people. And, you know, we'll take a lot of instances from Steve Jobs' story. You know, sometimes you have to get rid of the founder for the company to move forward. So, yeah, that's the one line I would remind every entrepreneur. You are not the business. The business is a standalone, and you are a standalone. And its success, yes, is a reflection of the excellence that exists from the founder, but it can be run by so many other people that can be attached to this bigger vision. So it's bigger than just the individual who founded it. Reading allows you to see the world beyond your current circumstances and just also understand stories from somebody else's eye. And I think that's just something that I've carried along with me all these years. To read something new every single day is a commitment to myself. It's a commitment to the work that I do. Yeah, just, you know, access knowledge. And I think it's so funny that Kindles, you know, there's Kindles and the stuff that came about, but I am so attached to reading pages, you know, and having an actual physical book in my hand. It just makes me feel like I'm achieving something. So that particular habit is one that I don't compromise on, is to read something every single day. And obviously, basic other habits like, punctuality, like I said, the Kids Club really molded us in terms of respecting time and making a commitment to certain goals and making sure that in that time frame, you actually reach them. Yeah. For us right now, the next step would be we want to go over the borders. I think particularly the narrative that exists Kotamba is in every other township. You walk around and you see big malls being built, development is taking place, but, half of the time the community is being left behind. And I think I want to be that organization that bridges that gap to say, if we're driving development and bringing services to the people, the communities need to be taken with. We cannot have a beautiful mall that exists on the one side of a township and just across the road, you have a dilapidated school. It doesn't make sense for me. Those things need to be together, let's develop the schools, let's paint them, let's make them better. And while we're bringing that huge mall, if we're going to be building flats and everything, let's make sure there's parks, let's make sure townships are conducive to raise, children. And I think Pathfinders just wants that. It's people who seek out new paths. And that's how we actually even got to name Pathfinders. You'll see that our logo is a sign of hope, right in the middle of the P. And to say we need to be traveling this journey together. And it's not that we don't have entrepreneurs in the township that can really make a difference. We do. We just need to give them a platform to do that. I would appreciate it if a lot of us went back and asked ourselves, what are we leaving behind? And I think that's just something that has kept me very motivated. Being at home made me realize, I think when you leave and you stay there, you can rid yourself of the problems. But when you go back, you realize that nothing is going to change unless we are the ones that change it. And so that has kept me very motivated. I am involved in my business. I don't run it from a distance. So as and when I will go back and set up a mall because I need to remember why we started in the first place. It's to see that entrepreneurs set up and see themselves inside a mall. When I see young entrepreneurs, take something like branding so personal and they take it seriously, then I see what Pathfinders is being able to do. Is you are taking someone who used to trade informally and you're teaching them how to formally run a business. And I think that's also something that I learned from the fellowship. Part and parcel of my curriculum was, how do you structure a startup? And I think that's just something that is not taught even in the curriculum. We just think, I'm going to hustle and then all of a sudden I've got a business. No, business is structure. And so if we can teach structure like that, we'll have a lot more businesses grow from the township. The one thing that has always kept us ahead as an organization, and myself included, is to never feel like you've arrived. And learning is exactly that. I think the minute you get to a point where you feel like you know it all, you're in trouble because then somebody else might be ahead of you. So I think that has also kept us on the ground. We've kind of kept our head in the work because we never feel like we've arrived. There's always something new to learn. There's always something that you're going to gain somewhere in the day. So just always knowing that you don't know. There's always something new that you don't know. And that has kept us just one step ahead from starting the organization all the time. I was with Ambrose. I was in the US and there was a guy from Uganda. And Ambrose had a startup of creating a digital bracelet. He wanted to combat gender-based violence, or the number of rape cases in Uganda is insane. And so when Ambrose came to the US, I asked him, Ambrose, what changed for you? And he said to me, Glenda, the first thing that changed was they took care of my bread and butter. So I'm not worried about what my family is going to eat, and I'm not worried about a roof over their head. And when those things are taken care of, I can think better as an entrepreneur. And I think for me, that's the one thing that hinders a lot of small businesses in the township. The fact that before you can even grow the startup, it becomes your bread and butter first. And then it makes it harder to grow it beyond where it's at. So I think that's the one thing. And if it's your bread and butter, then you start messing up things like systems, money. There isn't structure because of it taking care of the basic needs. And I think if we got better at supporting startups once they graduate from, being at a small or to medium enterprise, that we need to kind of create a stepping stone for them to graduate from that. Because the one conversation we have the most in the township is someone remains a small to medium enterprise for 10 years. That does not make sense for me. There has to be a point where you're saying beyond this point, you're no longer a medium to small enterprise. You are now focusing on growth and expansion, and that's the next phase. And I think a lot of startups in the township don't go beyond that stage. The one thing that I've realized is very common is we're scared to hire people who are relevant for the different departments. Entrepreneurs become so attached. When you started a business or you have an idea, you kind of think you are that idea. And for me, that's the one thing that is going to make sure the startup never grows, because at some point you would need to hire, someone who is, versed in that particular department to run that department well. So I would say the one skill is hiring people. We need to get good at hiring people, hiring relevant people for the relevant department, for the relevant job. So if I were to put it in the simplest aspect, is let the bakers bake. It's not that you can take, if you can take flour and sugar, it doesn't make you a baker. You need someone who has, thoroughly done baking to call yourself a baker. And I think if we can get good at getting startups to recognize that, we would grow faster and quicker, because then you would have relevant people taking care of specific departments and making sure that they run them well. So startups fail because the founder thinks they can become the accountant, the marketing person, the delivery person, the one who makes the product, And so when you become the 7-in-1, it doesn't work. Eventually the system will collapse. And I think that's the one thing that we've quickly had to realize and get good at, is I needed to realize that I can't be everything. My organization involves amazing people who are running each department and are just doing amazing work because that's what they love, and that's what they studied, and they're in that department and managing it well. And I think that's just something that we startups need to get good at. The change, man, the change. 2021, I get a random call from the ambassador of the Netherlands. And he says, I hear there's a young girl who's back Gotemba and she's causing havoc, And for me, that's when I realized that someone notices the work that we're doing. We've embarked on a lot of projects as Pathfinders. Collegationing now, if you go, there are a few walls that we've painted. I had traveled to Canada and they had a mural fest, and I came back and I was like, that's one way we can deal with dumping sites. We need to create walls that have nice messages. And I think I wish more and more townships would adopt that, that if we're surrounded by messages that remind us of who we are, it would be easier to just, create that spark in the next child that's walking from school to home, to say, if they tried to bury us, they didn't know that we were seeds. Or if they would read a quote that our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate, is that we are powerful beyond measure. That for me, part and parcel of the Mural Fest was to create that spark to that simple child that grew up like me, but is reading a message, on walls that used to be dumping sites. So that has been quite, a motivation for us. But being able to create that change, it's the change in the startup, where you've taken someone who was trading on the side of the road and now they've become completely professional in terms of business. They're compliant. They're taking branding serious. To see that growth for us has been such a huge instigator for the work that we do. It inspires us all the time. Last year I was able to give at Mom's Mall, I currently have 4 entrepreneurs that are trading full-time now. They have stores inside Mamelodi. And Mom's Mall was just one of the malls that came to the party when they heard about Pathfinders. Lebu has grown her business so much. She does handcrafted earrings. but she would have never imagined herself owning a store inside a mall. And now she does that. And I'm super proud of the work that we do. There's Dumelo Baba Classic Cuts. There's Beauty by Shanti that now operates inside the mall. And so those businesses are just an example that we can actually, take up space. There is space for us. And Black business has room to participate in these malls that exist in communities. But it's even more inspiring for the local child to see someone who comes from their neighborhood own a shop, just that to close that gap, to say it's not something that's far-fetched or it's not for the special person. But you could see someone who's from your local community actually own a store. Because half of the time we know about franchises, but we don't even know the owners. We don't even know the story. We can't even connect the two. But when you see someone who can grow a local business into a franchise and grow it beyond themselves, that just provides a lot of hope for that child that's go high. Impossible is nothing. I am a living testament to that. As much as, so I didn't even tell you that Part and Parcel is eventually 2021, I win the Fabulous Woman Award. And when I go back home and everybody in my community knows about the award, a gentleman who built one of the first coffee shops, him and the founder, Cliff Abud Beni, I used to spend a lot of time with them. I come through the door in that coffee shop and Abud Beni says, "I think you embody hope." And so from that day, he's given me that name. So now when I call him, he's like, "Hope, how are you?" So there's just a deep sense of desire all the time to carry that name in its fullness, that name of hope. And hope is that tiny voice once in a while that will say, try again, even if you failed. Hope is what keeps us going when we don't feel like it, So yeah, I would say impossible is nothing. I went from a young girl, Onakuga Kotemba. Hamanskral is known for a water problem. So Gereka Medi, are no metsi a pompo. To go from that girl who kuka digubu a reka metsi to waking up and I'm in North America and I have to pinch myself to say, this cannot be me. It was insane. Like I saw, ice mountains, polar bears, and I'm like, how did I go from one part of the earth and almost do half of the earth's radius? And I'm just the girl from Temba. That has been quite inspiring for me. So yeah, young Glenda, I would say impossible is nothing. And you are definitely not your circumstances. There's nothing that you cannot achieve. I'm a testament to that.